In just his first month as Pope, Leo XIV has made a huge move that few expected, and many are already calling historic. On June 5th, the Vatican quietly announced the appointment of Bishop Joseph Lin Yuntuan as Auxiliary Bishop of Fuzhou, a diocese in southeastern China. Less than a week later, on June 11th, Chinese authorities officially recognized the appointment. It may have passed without global fanfare, but within church circles and diplomatic halls, the message was loud and clear. This wasn't just about a new bishop. This was about the future of the church in China. And more importantly, it was about continuity and controversy. Because this appointment didn't happen in isolation. It was carried out under the framework of a highly debated agreement signed in 2018 between the Holy See and the Chinese Communist Party. That deal, initiated by Pope Francis, gave both Rome and Beijing a role in the appointment of bishops in China. For some, it was a breakthrough in dialogue. For others, it was a betrayal of the underground church and a surrender to state control. Now, with Pope Francis gone and Pope Leo XIV newly elected, many wondered whether the new pontiff would take a different path, perhaps a more traditional one, more cautious of authoritarian regimes, and more protective of the church's independence. Instead, Leo XIV has chosen to continue one of Francis' most controversial policies, and that decision is shaking up assumptions about what kind of pope he will be. So who is Bishop Joseph Lin Yuntuan? Why does this deal with China remain so divisive? And what does this appointment tell us about the direction Leo XIV plans to take the church? In this video, we'll break it all down. Before we start, comment where you are watching from. To understand the weight of Pope Leo's appointment of Bishop Joseph Lin Yuntuan, we need to step back, decades back, into one of the longest and most delicate diplomatic standoffs in modern church history. For over 70 years, the relationship between the Vatican and China has been defined by tension, silence, and often suffering. The root of the problem? A basic but irreconcilable question: who has the authority to appoint bishops in China? The split dates back to 1951, when the Chinese Communist Party, after seizing power, severed diplomatic ties with the Holy See. Religion, under the communist worldview, was seen not only as superstition, but as a potential threat to national unity, especially when its loyalty extended beyond China's borders. As a result, Beijing created its own institution, the Chinese Patriotic Catholic Association (CPCA), a state-sanctioned church that recognized no authority outside of China, not even the Pope, and thus began a painful chapter in the life of the Chinese church. On one side stood the official church, registered with the government, permitted to operate, but cut off from the Vatican. On the other, the underground church, which remained loyal to the Pope but was forced into secrecy. Its priests and bishops were often watched, harassed, detained, or worse. And yet, through all these trials, many underground Catholics held firm, believing that unity with Rome was worth the cost. For the Vatican, the bishop is not just a religious figure, he's a successor to the apostles, a shepherd chosen by divine authority through the Pope. Letting a government dictate bishops would compromise that authority and risk turning the church into an arm of the state. But for the Chinese government, allowing a foreign power to choose religious leaders was seen as a threat to national sovereignty, a red line that could not be crossed. For decades, this standoff prevented progress. Bishops were appointed by the government without papal approval, and others were secretly ordained with Rome's blessing, but without Chinese recognition. The result: dozens of bishops existed in limbo, unrecognized by one side or the other, and millions of Catholics were caught in the middle. Then came Pope Francis, a pope known for bold gestures and diplomatic outreach. In September 2018, after years of quiet negotiations, the Vatican signed a provisional agreement with Beijing. The central aim was simple: to heal the internal rift in the Chinese church by establishing a process for appointing bishops that both sides could accept. Under the deal, the Chinese government proposes candidates for bishop. The Vatican then reviews and approves or rejects the nomination. Ultimately, the Pope retains the final word. As part of the deal, Francis also lifted the excommunications of 7 bishops, previously appointed by the Chinese government without papal approval, a symbolic act of reconciliation. The Vatican described the deal as pastoral, not political, a way to ensure that Chinese Catholics could have bishops in communion with Rome, even if they were first proposed by the state. Officials said it was a first step toward dialogue and normalization, but not everyone was convinced. Critics, including Cardinal Joseph Zen, the outspoken former Bishop of Hong Kong condemned the deal as a betrayal of the underground church. They argued that the Vatican had given too much away, allowing an authoritarian regime to influence church governance. Some underground bishops and clergy were pressured to join the state-approved church or risk losing legal protection. Meanwhile, reports of continued persecution, forced church demolitions, and surveillance of priests continued to emerge from China, casting doubt on whether the deal had improved conditions at all. Even within the Vatican, some cardinals reportedly felt uneasy. The details of the agreement remained secret, and skeptics worried it set a dangerous precedent. If one government could negotiate bishop appointments, what's to stop others from demanding the same? Despite the criticism, the deal was renewed in 2020, and again in 2022, with few changes made public. And now in 2025, many assumed the policy might be reevaluated, perhaps even reversed. But that's not what happened. With his first major foreign appointment, Bishop Joseph Lin Yuntuan, Leo XIV made it clear, this Francis policy will continue. And with that one decision, he reaffirmed not only the legacy of his predecessor, but also the Vatican's commitment to its long and complicated engagement with China. I'm curious to know your opinion on this. Leave a comment below. Now that we've seen why this appointment is important, let's meet the man at the center of it. Bishop Joseph Lin Yuntuan, the first high-profile Chinese cleric appointed under Pope Leo's new papacy. His story is more than just a clerical resume. It reflects the long and difficult journey of the Catholic Church in China, and it explains why his appointment under Pope Leo is being watched so closely by both Rome and Beijing. Bishop Lin was born on March 12, 1952, in Fuqing, a city located in Fujian Province on China's southeastern coast. This region has long been a stronghold of Catholicism in China, where the faith has endured through waves of suppression. Lin entered the Fuzhou Diocesan Seminary in 1979, not long after China began easing some of its restrictions on religious practice following the Cultural Revolution. He was ordained a priest on April 9, 1984, and from that point forward, he devoted his life to both pastoral work and the governance of the local church. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Lin served as a parish priest and also held various diocesan administrative roles. He taught in the local seminary, helped manage the economic affairs of the diocese, and served as an episcopal delegate. These aren't just bureaucratic titles, they represent decades of deep engagement with the daily struggles of keeping the church alive and functioning in a politically sensitive environment. But perhaps the most significant chapters of his ministry came when he served as a diocesan administrator from 2003 to 2007 and again from 2013 to 2016. During this time, he acted as a kind of steward for the diocese in the absence of a bishop, entrusted by the Vatican with the responsibility of guiding the faithful. In 2017, Lin was secretly consecrated as a bishop of the underground church, an act that placed him in direct opposition to state control and put him at considerable personal risk. Despite that, his relationship with both the Vatican and local authorities appears to have gradually stabilized. On June 5, 2025, Pope Leo XIV officially named Lin as the auxiliary bishop of Fuzhou, doing so under the terms of the 2018 Vatican-China agreement. And on June 11th, less than a week later, the Chinese government formally recognized his role, holding a public installation ceremony and granting him civil acknowledgement. This sequence, Vatican appointment first, followed by state recognition, is rare and deeply symbolic. It marks a moment of cooperation under an agreement that has often been the subject of confusion and criticism. In a public statement, the Vatican expressed satisfaction with the outcome. It called the appointment a further fruit of the dialogue between the Holy See and the Chinese authorities, and praised the recognition as a step forward in the Church's mission in China. During the installation ceremony, Bishop Lin gave a speech in which he pledged to respect Chinese law, promote social harmony, and support the Sinicization of religion, a term used by Chinese authorities to describe the adaptation of religion to fit Chinese cultural and political norms. That part of his statement raised eyebrows in some Catholic circles. But it also reflects the delicate balancing act Lin must perform. He is not just a man of the Church, he is a man navigating two very different worlds. On the one hand, he is loyal to the Pope and the teachings of the Catholic faith. On the other, he must operate within a system that strictly monitors religious expression and places national loyalty above all. Still, Joseph Lin Yuntuan may be exactly the kind of figure this moment requires. He is trusted by the Vatican, having served quietly and faithfully for decades. He is tolerated, even accepted, by Chinese authorities, at least for now. And he is a symbol of what is possible when dialogue replaces division. For underground Catholics, many of whom have lived for years without recognized leadership, his appointment could offer a glimmer of hope. And for the Vatican, Lin represents the first successful test of the deal under a new pope, a sign that, at least in this case, cooperation is possible. In that sense, this isn't just about one bishop or one diocese. It's about the larger question of whether the Church in China can be unified, not by force, but by faith, and whether Pope Leo XIV can continue what his predecessor began, without losing the trust of those who have suffered the most for their loyalty to Rome. Bishop Joseph Lin Yuntuan's appointment might seem like just another Vatican headline, but to millions of Chinese Catholics and to a global church watching with concern and hope, it means far more. His recognition under both Vatican and Chinese authority represents a rare moment of agreement between two institutions that have been at odds for over 7 decades. But it also opens the door to deeper questions. What does this mean for China's divided Catholic population? What does it reveal about Pope Leo's vision for the Church? And could this be the beginning of something bigger, or just a one-off success? For Catholics in China, the challenges have never been purely theological. Their faith has often come with a price: surveillance, restrictions, and for many in the underground church, harassment or imprisonment. These faithful have remained loyal to the Pope in Rome through decades of persecution, even when it meant operating in secret, celebrating Mass in homes or in the wilderness, and living without official recognition. Now, with Bishop Lin's appointment, recognized by both the Holy See and the Chinese government, some of these Catholics may feel cautiously hopeful. Lin, after all, was once part of that underground church himself. He knows the reality on the ground. And while his recognition by the state may be seen by some as a compromise, it also signals the possibility that loyalty to Rome may no longer have to mean marginalization. But the situation is still fragile. Many in the underground church remain skeptical. They fear that recognition under the 2018 deal could lead to increased pressure to join the state-run church, an institution that, for years, operated without recognizing the Pope's authority. There are concerns that priests and bishops who remain in the underground may be coerced into registering with the government or face closure of their communities. In this light, Bishop Lin's acceptance could be interpreted not just as progress, but as a test case, a way for the government to see how far it can integrate previously underground clergy into its framework. From the Vatican's perspective, however, the appointment is a diplomatic and pastoral win. It demonstrates that the 2018 agreement, while controversial, is functioning, at least in some cases. Bishop Lin wasn't forced onto the church by the state. He was chosen by the Pope under a process both parties agreed to. His recognition by Beijing offers a rare example of harmony between Rome's spiritual authority and China's political sovereignty. That in itself is no small feat. For Pope Leo, the decision to move forward with the appointment sends a clear message: continuity in foreign policy. Despite being viewed as more traditional than his predecessor, Leo is choosing not to dismantle the diplomatic bridges Pope Francis built. Instead, he appears to be reinforcing them, but on his own terms, quietly, clearly, and with deliberate symbolism. Lin's appointment allows Leo to show that tradition and diplomacy don't have to be in conflict. A bishop loyal to Rome, formed in underground ministry, can be recognized by China without giving up Catholic identity. Still, the global church is watching with caution. The Vatican's engagement with authoritarian regimes, whether in China, Nicaragua, or beyond, always walks a fine line between diplomacy and moral compromise. Critics argue that the church should speak out more forcefully on religious persecution and human rights. Supporters counter that dialogue, however imperfect, is the only path toward real change. At the heart of it all lies a deeper question. Can the Catholic Church operate faithfully and freely under a regime that places severe limits on religion? Or must it choose between access and integrity? For now, Bishop Lin's appointment doesn't resolve those questions, but it does move the conversation forward. It shows that the Church is still trying to unify its flock in China, still trying to be present in places where faith is fragile, and still trying to assert its mission in a world that often misunderstands or opposes it. In that sense, the impact of this appointment stretches far beyond Fuzhou. It's a reflection of how the Church is navigating the 21st century, balancing truth with diplomacy, faith with reality, and above all, loyalty to Christ with responsibility to the people it serves. Whether Bishop Lin becomes a model for future appointments or an exception to the rule will depend on what happens next. Will the Chinese government continue to cooperate? Will underground Catholics be allowed to remain faithful without pressure? Will the Vatican keep its promises to defend freedom of conscience? These are the questions that remain. Bishop Joseph Lin Yuntuan's appointment under the Vatican's agreement with China has given Pope Leo's an unmistakable starting point, but it also places his pontificate at a crossroads. Will this move mark a slow and careful push toward reconciliation between Rome and Beijing? Or will it be seen as the Vatican compromising too much, too early? So far, Pope Leo has struck a deliberate tone. He has been clear and composed but not reactive. He has not made sweeping declarations or sudden breaks from his predecessor. And yet, in a world where even the quietest decisions by the Pope can shift global conversations, this single appointment has already created waves. Supporters of the 2018 Vatican-China agreement are hopeful that Leo will continue Pope Francis' diplomatic strategy, but with firmer boundaries and greater accountability. They believe that remaining engaged with China, even under difficult conditions, is better than turning away and leaving millions of Catholics without guidance. To them, dialogue is not weakness. It is pastoral responsibility. It means being present in every part of the world, including places where the Church must move with caution. But critics see it differently. Many traditional Catholics and advocates for religious freedom are deeply concerned. They want the Vatican to be louder in its defense of underground clergy. They fear that appointments like Bishop Lin, while personally faithful and loyal, could become symbols of the Church slowly surrendering its independence. They question whether the long-term cost of the deal will be the very identity that has sustained Catholicism through centuries of persecution. Pope Leo XIV now faces choices that extend far beyond one diocese. He must decide how the Church will engage with political power when religious liberty is not guaranteed. Will he continue this agreement as it stands? Will he demand stronger protections for Catholics on the ground? Or, if necessary, will he step away from the deal entirely? What happens in China will also send a message to other countries where freedom of worship is under pressure. Governments that seek control over religious expression are watching the Vatican. They want to know whether the Church will stand up clearly for faith and conscience, or whether it will remain silent in exchange for limited influence. And most of all, Chinese Catholics are watching. They are the ones living with the consequences. For them, this is not just diplomacy, it is real life. They want to know if they can pray openly, attend Mass freely, and remain in communion with the Pope without fear of punishment or state pressure. They want to know if the Church will protect them. As this new papacy continues, this issue will likely define part of Leo's legacy. How he handles the balance between truth and diplomacy, between spiritual authority and political realism, will shape how history remembers him. His first major step, the appointment of Bishop Lin, was careful, symbolic, and deeply meaningful. It avoided confrontation, but it did not back down. It pointed in a direction. Whether that direction leads to unity or further struggle remains to be seen. But in this moment, Pope Leo has chosen to lead not with loud gestures, but with conviction. He is not promising revolutions. He is offering steadiness, clarity, and the possibility of something greater than politics, the unity of the Church under Christ. The journey ahead will be challenging, but if this first step is any indication, Leo XIV is ready to walk it with resolve, grounded in tradition and open to dialogue, trusting that faith must never be silent, even in the hardest places.